Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us here on KTN News, where we endeavor to adequately inform you. We want to turn the crack now from politics to matters urban development. And just to prime you on what is happening this week is a big conference or a forum that will be happening in Nakuru, where they will be hosting the first edition of the Kenya's Urban Forum Conference. And they're expecting 5,000 delegates who will be in attendance. And we briefed that this is being organized in support from, with support, I should say, from the State Department for Housing and Urban Development, the United Nations Human Rights Settlements Program, that is UN Habitat, and the World Bank, which is aiming, of course, to promote urbanization as a positive, transformative force for people and communities, and also is being geared towards reducing inequality, discrimination, and poverty. And so the Urban Forum Conference reflects the shift in Kenya to devolve service and developmental focus away from capital cities. And it is expected high-level leadership dialogue that will be speaking to the strengthening of sustainable development in urban areas, because by getting it right, urbanization offers a chance to bring about socio-economic benefits that can spur development, eradicate poverty, and protect their environment. And this morning, I have the good fortune of hosting the people who will be, of course, speaking to this forum and just broadly speaking about the urbanization and where we are right now. And this being a maiden forum that will be happening in Nakuru, there's a lot that we need to know so far. And allow me just to introduce our guest this morning. I'm holding court with Florence Nyole. She is the president of Architectural Association of Kenya. And also we have the president of Kenya Institute of Planners. This is Fawcett Komol. And we have with us as well, from all the way fresh from Naivasha, Nakuru County for that matter. He's just smelling fresh right from there. This is none other than John Kihiga, who is the CEC of Land Planning and, of course, Urban and Housing. You'll tell us more about that also in the program as well. So let's just begin from that particular matter that we have the forum, the first edition. The president is expected also to just be presiding over and officially opening this particular delegation that will be held in Nakuru. First of all, you can tell us, Kenya Urban Forum, why have they chosen Nakuru for that matter? You are the newest city. Do we have any inkling with that?
Thank you, Dibal, and good morning, viewers. My name, as you've said, is John Kehagi, not Kehiga. Kehagi.
You even gave me the card. In my mind, it's just Kehiga.
It's
the
not
big stone, the big rock.
Yes, and I'm the I'm the county executive committee member for lands, physical planning, housing, and urban development in Nakuru County government. And we appreciate your invite to come and talk to Kenyans about the Kenya Urban Forum that is scheduled to begin the day after tomorrow and to run for 3 consecutive days. That's 14th, 15th, and 16th, with the official opening by His Excellency the President on the 15th. We are excited as Nakuru County to host this. It will be at the Lake Naivasha Resort in Naivasha. And as you've said, Nakuru is one of the fastest urbanizing counties in the country. And we were lucky that on December 1st, 2021, Nakuru was granted a charter to be a city. And we are experiencing rapid urbanization. Naivasha, you all know, is going to be one of the fastest growing towns. A resort, we are actually anticipating it to be a resort city in the near future. So we feel grateful that even the Kenya Urban Forum was decided to be hosted in Nakuru County. And the people of Nakuru County are upbeat. We'll have 2 successful events, because shortly after that we also have the World Rally Championship in Naivasha. So we are taking it as a build-up towards good things in Nakuru.
Of course, stimulation of the economy as it is, right?
Yeah, a good stimulus for our economy. and for our country at large.
Can you remember, if you're privy to what the theme this particular forum will be running under?
Yes, we have what we are calling the slogan for the forum or the conference is that the future is urban. And we are actually saying the future is now. And we are saying the theme is strategic pathways towards sustainable and inclusive urban areas.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. All right. We look forward to mining a lot of wealth of knowledge from you as well as far this forum is concerned. Let me just come to you, Florence Enyole, and ask you, first of all, broadly speaking, how you're plugging in with the Kenya Urban Forum, and you'll be talking, broadly speaking, as well, also on the aspect of urbanization currently. But you can tell us, how do we, the Association of Architectural Association of Kenya, plugging in with the Urban Forum?
Right, so the Architectural Association of Kenya is a Built Environment Professionals Association. We actually have 8 different professions who practice in the built environment: architects, engineers, planners, and quantity surveyors. And we have another 4 who may not be regulated. So landscape architects, environmental design consultants. We have construction project managers and interior designers. So in terms of urbanization, we do play in the, in the field of the built environment, and therefore our professionals are part and parcel of the built environment, and in that case they participate in this entire conversation around urbanization. How the association is coming in is that our vision is to actually promote excellence in the built environment, and with Kenya being a very rapidly urbanizing country, it's important that we are part of that conversation, that we are there and we're able to offer our services not only as professionals but also give thought leadership around the issues of urbanization across the country. As you know, it's said that probably by the year 2050, 50% of the population in the world will actually be living in urban areas, and by that means people will need housing. They'll need to be mobility will need to have been figured out by then. Issues of live, work and play will need to have been looked at. So professionals need to be at the center of the conversation at the end of the day, so that as we are urbanizing, we also know what our role is in terms of what we need to do as professionals around the issue of urbanization. And that's how the Architectural Association is coming in. We want to offer our professional services and want to offer ourselves in terms of the conversation around urban areas. And we will be there not only to just speak, but also to show examples or to show some of the things that we are doing in terms of what urbanization should look like in the near future, to offer our leadership, to offer our thoughts, and to offer our services in terms of professionals. One of the other things we're also very keen on is I know very well that there'll be quite a number of counties. You know that Kenya is a devolved country, and therefore we want to offer the idea of ensuring that our counties also take seriously the issue of having professionals at the center of urbanization. We have a lot of construction going on in this country, but very seldom do we find that professionals are being used, especially in urban areas that may not necessarily be among the cities or municipalities, and therefore want to be at the center of it and perhaps touch base with the county governments as they come together to discuss the issue of urbanization. And that's where the association is coming in, to show that, yes, you really do need professionals to be at the center of this urban conversation. Yes.
Indeed. And when you're also talking about counties, we remember Section 5 of the Counties Government Act that really stipulates on how also the CECs, especially when it comes to urbanization, they should be working in complementarity with the national government as it is. So we'll be latching on that briefly as well. But the planning is key. When you're talking about urban forms, when you're talking about urban compactness, when you're talking about just sustainability, because I think we're building up also, even as we are urbanizing, the much fetishized word is, environmental social governance. How do we build sustainable buildings or urban cities as well, so that we may be in line with what the environment is going through as well. So in light of that, we know also that sustainability is very key. But Fawcett, if I may just come to you as well, you can tell us more about the Kenya Institute of Planners and how also they're plugging in on this particular forum, and generally speaking, what you're all about when it comes to urban planning.
Sure. Thank you, Debal. I come from the Kenya Institute of Planners. where our rallying call is making Kenya a planning society. And our membership draws from a number of sectors, including government. Mheshimiwa Kihagi here is one of our luminaries in the planning profession.
Oh, okay.
We have members from the academia. I come from the academia myself. I teach at the Technical University of Kenya. We have members in the private sector. We have members working with various international bodies and organizations, all with the intention of bringing in the strategic perspective that we are talking about here. It's not possible to talk about planning or to talk about strategic direction for any type of development without thinking about planning. And so as planners, we are key. We are actually the movers of this discussion. And so even in the Kenya Urban Forum, a number of organizations have been cited to have participated in organizing the meetup that's going to happen there in Naivasha. But the Kenya Institute of Planners has also played a critical role, and we are going to play a critical role going forward in advancing the discussions that we are going to have. We have members who are going to offer keynote speeches, who are going to lead panel discussions, and who are going to also guide the policy discussions and debates that are going to happen there. Our concerns generally are with not only with urban planning, but as you know, urban planning organizes all the other facets of development around it. We have issues of urban housing, which currently, again, is forming a big discussion around the country. We have issues of urban infrastructure, urban economy and poverty. We have issues of climate change. Again, when you talk about sustainability, you have to bring in the environment very strongly. So this is, in brief, parts of the discussions that we're going to have in Naivasha. And again, if we talk about all these things but do not link all this to plan implementation and financing of plans, it's all useless. So we'll be having a number of organizations as well, also represented, who will be talking and checking the different pathways that would enhance urban finance or financing for the various interventions that planners would propose. I think that's also very key. And going forward also, even as we talk about making Kenya a planning society, we are still a grossly underplanned society.
Grossly underplanned.
Grossly underplanned. Grossly underplanned. Many people have claimed that Kenya has had so many plans. Indeed, we have had plans before, but plans get reviewed every now and then. So if you have plans for 10 years ago and you haven't reviewed it in the maybe intervening period between then and now, you don't have a plan, because plans are for the future. And so planners' work is generally one that evolves with time. And so this is why we say that Kenya is still grossly underplanned, and we try to push from the Kenya Institute of Planners for increased involvement of planners at the national level, county level, and at various local levels, at the ward level, even at the village or community level, so as to make the country to be more inclined towards planned future than one that's left to evolve organically, as is currently happening in many parts of our country.
Right, grossly underplanned, and I want to just maybe conflict that particular issue with you, Honorable John, and ask you first of all, you are in this forum to assess, attraction towards the UN 2030, that is Sustainable Development Goals, and also Africa Union 2063. Yeah. How then is grossly under planning and this structure of SDGs and 2063, shaking into place? Is that a niggling worry?
Yes, the president of the Kenya Institute of Planners is right. We've grossly underplanned our country, but also it has also come from funding for the urban development initiatives within the country, such that you find within our national budget and even our county budgets, planning is given very little emphasis. But luckily, through our constitution, first of all, envisages that urban management and governance should be given a key highlight. And that's why it talks of creation of urban management institutions, which has actually been actualized in the Urban Areas and Cities Act. The Urban Areas and Cities Act has also formed these urban management institutions, the boards, for the city boards and the municipalities. And we will also have committees for the towns and market centers. And now, through the State Department of Housing and Urban Development, we are able to leverage on external funding, especially from the World Bank. We've already received quite some assistance in the Kenya Informal Sector Improvement Project or programs, whereby a lot of our informal sectors in major towns have been upgraded. We've also had quite a number of projects done under the Kenya Urban Support Program through the State Department of Housing and Urban Development and the World Bank funding. So we are saying in this forum that we envisage to have in the next 3 days, we should investigate and come up with the discourse on how we are going to come up with proper funding for urban planning. Already quite a number of counties, Nakuru being one of them, we've prepared our county spatial plans. And these are emanating from the National Spatial Plan that has been prepared to guide the planning or the development framework, especially infrastructural projects, massive infrastructural projects within our country. And with these now, we are expecting that now they will also cascade to urban development plans. And now the urban development plans are more intense in terms of what we are looking at within the urban centers themselves. So we'd expect that the financing for these plans, their preparation, their implementation, and their review will also be coming from the budgets of the county governments, the national government, and also the donor agencies. And we are happy that we are working together with the UN Habitat, because they're also giving us quite a lot of support in ensuring that our urban centers are planned properly to meet the strategic development goals that have been set. And also the aspirations of the Kenyans, as it's been said, we want livable and inclusive cities. If we don't plan, actually we leave a lot of our population behind, and we find that our cities are not going to be the centers of innovation, the centers of development and economic growth that we expect in this country.
Planning. So we have the Kenya urbanized population really growing, but it's not really evenly distributed. I know this will really follow under the remit of planning. But people are asking then, even if it's not evenly distributed, then why is urbanization resulting in relatively low per capita income?
I think the most important thing to note, Dibal, is the fact that even as we're urbanizing, many people are coming to the urban areas to look for work or economic opportunities at the end of the day. But if they come to a place where there's not already a set plan and set infrastructure to enable that particular environment to grow in terms of economic activities, then it becomes a challenge. And so we end up having what you call proliferation of informal settlements, so to speak, or unplanned areas, as the president of KIP has talked about. The fact that we have not yet planned for those areas, but those areas are already being occupied, right? So what we're seeing in our country is that that development is going before planning. That development has gone ahead, therefore planning is coming behind. Yet in what we call best practice is that we should be having planning ahead of development, and we should be able to anticipate this at the end of the day. We are a growing nation. Right now we are heading towards 50 million plus, and therefore if we're talking about a population of around 25 million that will be living in urban areas, we need to plan those urban areas at the end of the day to make sure that we are quite well versed with what areas will be commercial, what areas will be residential, what areas will be manufacturing areas, what areas will be green spaces, and so on and so forth, which areas we need to connect in terms of roads, infrastructure, sewer, garbage collection, and so on and so forth. So what happens is that if we do not plan then we're actually failing as a country. And we need to do that quite importantly. As it has been said before, we have plans, but they're not yet implemented, There are very beautiful plans out there, but they're not yet implemented. The second thing is that our plans are really high-level plans, maybe county-wide or city-wide, but they do not go to the local planning level. And that's a big issue, because what happens is that then, as an individual, I decide that I want to build something somewhere. I just go, I apply for a development application, and I proceed and plan. But at the end of the day, if governments can put in place specific land use planning to say that these areas you can build commercial facilities, in these areas you need to do institutional facilities, these areas are for residential facilities, it helps then, even when somebody is acquiring land and they want to develop it, they already know what is allowed in a particular area. So we have a lot of, whether we like it or not, a lot of informality in how our urban areas are growing, and it's important that we become a planning nation at the end of the day, where plans go ahead of development, so that we begin to start. It's kind of like a race. The development has gone way ahead of planning. So we need to first have the plans and then have our development going on. I see, like, for instance, the county of Kisumu actually paused developments. They did a plan, and now they're able to say these areas are areas that the type of land use that you should be having in certain areas, whether it's residential, commercial, manufacturing, and so on, industrial, and so on and so forth. And therefore, it helps the county to be able to know these are the areas that we can develop. And what happens is that when you plan well, then the government has even the opportunity to think, okay, these are the type of infrastructure that we need to invest in order to make those areas viable. As you're saying, that if it's a low income per capita, then it's possible that then maybe we need to improve the roads, maybe we need to improve the sewer in these areas, maybe connectivity at the end of the day. Because remember, when you talk about economic viability of a space, you're talking about how will people be able to access where they're working, how will people be able to access social facilities, schools, hospitals, and so on and so forth at the end of the day. Green spaces which enable people to live well and work well at the end of the day. So we need to really focus on planning. It's a very serious thing, by the way, and therefore we should be able to have high-level plans that trickle down to the local levels, and then those local levels, you allow also people to participate in planning their own spaces, because at the end of the day, it's the people on the ground who know, okay, I think we need to plan these spaces to fit our needs or fit our use at the end of the day. So it's about working across the different areas. So the government could be involved in doing the high-level plans, and then the population or the citizens are involved in doing the local plans at the end of the day. And therefore, with that, then we're able to come up with very good plans that then speak to the kind of development that we want to see in the near future. Thank you.
All right. So the issue of urban development and planning as well are very key. They go hand in hand. But also when you talk about urban and planning, the inevitability of urban sprawls that really comes in tandem with the development as well. Is it something that is forgotten about the sprawls that, we'll have this particular segment that is dedicated for maybe, should we say, housing, but adjacent to that we'll have a slum. How does the sprawling of it really happen? That's what I'm asking. During the planning phase, do we miss out and looking at this particular constituent that actually will be there just in tandem or next to? Yes.
Thank you, Dibal. That question, I think, brings us to the bigger perspective of what planning portends. When we talk about the future being urban, it does not mean that the present moment that we live in is not urban already. And at the planning school, we study for urban and regional planning. And so in urban and regional planning, we contextualize development in different spaces, be they urban areas and the surrounding rural hinterland, both combined, the urban area and the rural hinterland, making what we call the region typically. And so you notice that as urban areas are developing without plans, and as you say, urban sprawl happens, urbanization, so we have a large urban footprint, which is less serviced with a low level of supply of infrastructure, as Madam President of the AAK has mentioned, which then leads to various difficult conditions or situations, including poor housing, as you say. We have slums coming left, right, center. So the problem of sprawl, as it were, needs a bigger outlook than just the urban that we're talking about, just the urban core that we're talking about. Because then again, the food that we eat in the city, for example, comes from the rural hinterland, right? So as we talk about food security for the urban areas, we have to think about where the food that we eat is going to come from. And so this means then that the suburban or the peri-urban regions or the peri-urban areas of any town will need to be protected going forward, for purposes of food production and for other environmental services. For example, the water that is used here in Nairobi comes all the way from Murang'a and Kirinyaga County, right? It means then that if the environment of the Mount Kenya region is not properly taken care of, then Nairobi is in danger of water scarcity, and that is a big deal. Currently, I think we have water scarcity in Africa up to 60%, and not just water. We're talking about all other utilities. We have problems with electricity supply, with waste management and stuff like that. It means then that we have to be, this is the reason why the Kenya Urban Forum talks about strategic pathways. And so we have to think in a bigger and a larger context. So bringing in different types of planning. Again, planning is not just a single blanket profession or discipline. We have urban planners, typically who deal with planning within the urban space, like most of us are, maybe 60 to 70% are urban planners. Then you have regional planners who look at space from a much larger scale, that's the regional scale. Then you have those that focus in the rural areas. Of course, then it comes down to urban design, where we also focus on planning at the neighborhood and the street level. So when we look at all these levels together, or perhaps even separately, what then should help us is that strategic thread that ties all of them together to make sure that we have urban areas and cities that function. Again, just for a bit of context, right now we have how many cities? We have Nairobi, Kisumu, Nakuru, and Mombasa. Those are four cities already. But we have others in the works, like Eldoret, Nyeri. Isiolo, which is an upcoming resort city. So we are going to have, in the next 10 to 20 years, at least 40 cities in Kenya, right? So when we talk about, because we talk about all these county headquarters, all these, one way or another, based on the trajectory of our development, are going to be cities. So we need additional increase in some of these debates that we're having, like this one that we're having now. And perhaps you should be inviting us a lot more to help talk about these issues and to let our people know that planning is a critical component of development of any country. And even as we do that, then we also have to open the conversation with the National Treasury, the Cabinet, the Presidency, to pay more attention to what planners say, to what policy makers in the planning field, what they say, so as to enable our society to be properly planned and properly guided in its development.
Indeed. And I will, when you talk about the multi-layers of how the planners also go from the national, regional, metropolitan planning to neighborhood as well, I think we'll come back to that. But I wanted just to come to Mheshimiwa Kihagi here and ask you, because now we're looking at 20 cities in the next 20 years, you said? Right? Yes. Yeah, almost 20 cities that we'll be having in this country. Yes. But even looking from the county perspective, we have the issue of legislative framework as well. How do you come about with with the county-specific, legislation. If you've talked about the county spatial planning that you borrow from, is it from the national government?
The national spatial plan.
National spatial planning, yes. But how do you come up with and ensure that you have a county-specific legislation for urban and maybe even for regional planning that should be enacted?
Okay, thank you. This would emanate from the manifesto. Like you see, within the Nakuru, Her Excellency the Governor has quite a clear manifesto on the urban development. We are talking of urban mobility, we are talking of urban waste management, we are talking of housing, we are talking of what he talked about, the urban open spaces and all that. So with that policy framework, we are able to come up with a registration that would guide urban development within the county. And with that within that framework, and also guided by, we've said, within Nakuru, we already have our county spatial plan. We are able to come up as an executive with a registration that is strictly going to guide development within that area. For instance, it's talked about preserving land for agricultural purposes. And that calls for proper suitability analysis. Where are we going to have our agriculture? Where are we going to have our industries? Where are we going to have our tourism? Because like in Nakuru, tourism is a major event or it's a major economic booster. Then with this now, we are going to work with the county assemblies and also with the Senate towards ensuring that we come up with legislative enablers that are going to ensure that whatever policy or framework that we have, because it's actually emanating from the national policy, let's say on food security. The urban sprawl that you're talking about is one of the greatest risks we have in this country, because you find when you live maybe all the way from Machakos to Eldoret, maybe one strip town, along that way, a lot of land that was not suitable for urban development has been swallowed. Land in Kiambu, which was initially maybe part of our economic mainstay for coffee, and now is concrete jungle. So we should be able to come up with legislation that protects land for various uses, and that's the mainstay of planning. Suitability analysis for land, allocate location for various land uses based on the suitability of that land and based on an national and county framework of economic development. Where do we envisage to be getting our food in the next 20 years? Where do we envisage to be having our land for recreation in the next 20 years? Or are we going to have everything turning into what we are when we say the future is urban, there is a risk of everything being urbanized, but in a very haphazard way that also makes service delivery very difficult, because once you cluster people together, it's easier for you to deliver services and high quality services. Once you cluster people together, it's also easy for administration and economic provision of these services. But once the people are scattered all over in urban sprawl, actually what you have is a very uneconomical setup, whereby government is going to strain, and whatever amount of money you have, you are trying to build roads, but you cannot make it. So we are saying it's high time that we also look at the policy and the legislative frameworks that are going to enable proper urban development. And we are also saying that maybe in the next 10 or so years, we are going to have more of our people living in urban areas than they are going to live in rural areas. And those of us who grew up in the 80s and early 90s, we remember the slogan was Turudi Mashambani. Yeah? And now we are saying that is no longer workable. People will live in urban areas. So the earlier we start focusing on how people are going to live in urban areas and live a dignified life, live an inclusive life, and ensure that even as we are talking of the current housing agenda, we do proper housing for our people, and housing in its totality, not just buildings, housing in its totality, whereby all these infrastructure services, the social services, the sanitation is going to be improved within these housing schemes. And it's to that extent that I believe us as the county governments and also we believe the professional institution are supporting the president's initiative of having these housing schemes done, because once you have people, one of the reasons we have urban sprawl is there is no housing within the city. So everybody who has land allowed, maybe in a commutable distance, is trying to subdivide their land so that the bulk can go there and buy a 50 by 100 and do your own housing. Then you have everybody everywhere. The Nairobi and the other cities are growing at an uncontrolled pace. But once we think about the housing program and how we are going to have people clustered in areas that have been professionally analyzed and seen to be suitable for human development, we are going to deliver housing and all the accompanying services, social services, in a better and more economical way for our country. And with that, we expect that urban sprawl will be stemmed, and we are also going to preserve land for our agricultural food production and other facilities we think we should have for our country.
Right. I was greatly shy maybe to broach the issue of the housing and the levy. You've brought it on the table. But I won't broach on it, but I also know what is the stand of the president also of the Association of Architectural Association of Kenya, Florence. So I don't want to delve deeper on it because we really stop for time. But allow me to orient our thoughts towards a green urban city or urbanization when we're talking about sustainable development goals as well. Would you kindly just paint and color for me, give me the feel and flavor of how a green urban city will look like in the next 20 years? In fact, not even in the next 20 years, because how many years are we shy of 2030 SDGs? It's actually seven years.
Yeah.
We're halfway through the year, so we're talking about 6.5.
Yeah.
How first of all, is SDG 11? This is where it's really centered on.
Yeah.
How is it making cities and human settlement inclusive, as it says, safe, resilient, and sustainable? Because I'm looking at by 2030 that we should have ensured access to all, to adequate, safe, affordable housing and basic services, and upgrade slums. But vitu kwa ground wanasema ni different, eh? And we've given 7 good years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can paint a picture for me, please.
So thank you so much, Dibal, for that. Just last week, we've just finished the UN Habitat Assembly,
Yes.
number 2, which is the second one since 2019. And one of the resolutions, and that's very important for people to know, is that they are actually putting upgrading of informal settlements at the forefront of what they need to do in order to achieve SDG 11, which is on sustainable cities and communities. And it's very important. Now, when you talk about sustainable cities, it means we are supposed to live and work and play ourselves today, but be able to live enough for the future generations at the end of the day without compromising them being able to do the same thing. In fact, we should be able to do that and enable them to have even more at the end of the day. And what we're doing right now, to be honest with you, we need to change completely. We need to completely think about the issue of sustainability in a different way. One, catering, as let's talk about, one is very important thing is about food security. That as we continue to have urban sprawl, people are changing arable land into a concrete jungle. Therefore, where are we going to grow our food, for instance? At the end of the day, we are an agricultural country. So that's an important thing. But also number 2 is the issue of energy and energy consumption, and also more importantly, how we are contributing to what we call climate change at the end of the day. A concrete jungle continues to contribute, and they say that the urban environment and specifically buildings contribute to 50% of carbon emissions. And these carbon emissions are the ones that are depleting the ozone layer at the end of the day and creating what we call global warming at the end of the day. And this is something that we talked about for many years, since 1973, when they talked about the crisis in terms of energy. So as professionals and as decision makers, where the government comes in, we need to really think about how we are contributing to that particular factor. At the end of the day, how we are building is very, very critical. And for me to paint a picture, I think it's also important that we analyze the kind of construction that we have around ourselves. If we're to take this building that we are in today, we should be able to look at it. How is it contributing in terms of energy, in terms of the materials that are being used here, in terms of the people who work here, how far do they commute to get to work at the end of the day, because mobility also is a very, very key issue. At the Architectural Association of Kenya, we've actually just launched the Safari Green Building Rating Tool, which is an index that allows us as professionals to rate our developments, be they commercial, be they residential, whatever developments we are doing, we need to rate them and say, okay, this building in terms of rating meets 50% of what we need to do. So what can an architect, for instance, improve in terms of ensuring that that particular building then contributes less to carbon emissions, contribute less to the same. But maybe I want to bring it back to the issue of planning, because planning is very important, that at the end of the day, when you talk about sustainability, we need to look at it from a very broad perspective, that as we are planning, it's very important that we also look at instruments that enable us to plan. For instance, in Nairobi, there are issues that people are grappling with in terms of development control issues. Yeah, we need a very key thing is the development control policies, not only in Nairobi but across the major towns, major cities that are there in our country. That the development control at that particular area then will allow people to know that this is what is allowable in terms of construction. Because if we allow so much development, we're actually contributing more to the to greenhouse gases emissions and so on and so forth. Then number two is also the land use plan policies that are there, that in particular areas, like for instance, if we have industries, and then we've had these issues where we're having industries that are polluting rivers, for instance, Nairobi, apparently here we used to have very clean rivers back in the day, but now they are completely, there's no fish, there's nothing in the rivers that are flowing across our city, yet they used to be green before. So what has happened? How are people, where is the effluent going? So in terms of garbage collection, wastewater management, it's also a very key issue that we need to look into. And then, as I said before, green spaces, urban areas need green spaces. People need to leave their houses and have urban areas or urban spaces where they're able to breathe, enjoy, recreate at the end of the day, and therefore, creating this atmosphere of a green city. Then also, much importantly, is how we are commuting from one place to another. We do have an expressway that's passing through our city, but it's a very unsustainable way of construction, if you ask me, because it only caters for a minority of Kenyans, whereas the majority use the lower spaces. Why don't we have very good mobility in terms of movement from one area to another, where the public transportation can cater for maybe a bus rapid transit system, maybe some importantly to enact also the commuter railing that has been there. We do have a very good plan around commuter railing in the city, but it has not been implemented. And other cities that are coming up, especially that have an opportunity to do that, and we are saying that Nairobi, or rather Kenya, will have many other cities in the next 20 or so years. They need to really look into that commuter railing. They need to look at urban spaces. They need to look at how people are building. And most importantly, and let me finish with this, is the issue of the building code. The building code has very good issues that's talking about. Today we're talking about a building code that's a 1968 document. Many years down the line, we're still discussing it. The national government should actually figure out how they can enact a building code, which will then trickle down to the county, so that as they are approving development, they have a template that gives standards on how we should build. And that building code then becomes kind of like a standard upon which you can then approve our buildings at the end of the day, and make sure that they're actually sustainable. The materials that you're using in there, that they have recreational spaces around that, green spaces, that the planning around the houses that we're constructing, the commercial spaces that you're constructing, are actually well done and well done. So there are instruments that the government can put in place. In this case, the building code, the development control policies, and the land use planning policies that can enable us to move there. And even as we construct as professionals, we need to be keen around what it is we are doing, so that we're able to ensure that we are being sustainable at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're talking about the building codes, we have that being floated around. We can see some areas that were dedicated to adhere to a certain building code. They floated that. There's no enforcement of the law to try and curb that. But I wanted just to come still with the building code and this mushrooming of high-rises everywhere in the city, especially of Nairobi, and I think that can be replicated elsewhere in the counties as well, as a learning lesson. First of all, as a threat to, our environment being green. We can talk about potable water that has become now a scarcity. There's the issue of sinking boreholes everywhere. And I wanted you just to talk about in terms of planning, because our water table also is receding with this. Maybe the near future will be like South Africa, where we'll be now, toying with the idea of showering once a day or maybe twice in a week. You have not even the flushing of your amenities can become something else. Can we talk about how we can regulate? Because people are saying, how can we regulate this sinking of boreholes so that we try and save our water table?
Well, the debate goes, I think, beyond the boreholes, and ideally it ought to begin from a more strategic perspective of urban infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Water supply is a component of abstraction of water. And of course the networks, the infrastructure networks. We have the piping systems, we have the storage systems and stuff like that. Now, I do not know, I wouldn't know, and many people in the urban planning field are actually wondering where we got this idea that we could meet our water demand for a city such as Nairobi by sinking boreholes. As it is right now, there are quite a number of boreholes around the city which are not functional anymore. The recharge levels of these boreholes has not been proportional with the abstraction levels. And so at a more strategic level, I think this government has thought before. At first we had Sasumua Dam, then we had Ndakaine Dam, and then of course we had the controversial but I think the brilliant idea of the northern, we call it the Northern Tunnel. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have to think about, as we think about urban development, we have to relate it with off-site sourcing or provision of some of the services like water. And so this also talks about, or brings about the perspective of regional integration, or maybe how one county and the next will need to operate. Going forward, it will become necessary for things like sources of water to become projects of strategic national importance. And this ideally will require that we look at water sources at as strategic installations that will become relevant for purposes of making sure that while we abstract water for use in Nairobi from Kirinyaga County or from Murang'a County, then Murang'a County, for that matter, will not be disenfranchised by that. So how is Nairobi County, or how would Nairobi County, for example, coexist with Murang'a County and form a working relationship where the water that we use in Nairobi will also be used along the way from the point where it's sourced from. But ideally, the issue of the boreholes, for me and for many people, I think even geologically, is not a way of ensuring that we have water security for a city such as Nairobi. And so we have to think regionally. We have to think regionally.
Indeed. Yeah. I just wanted to, before I come to Honorable Kihagi, the issue of what Florence was raising regarding just the greening as well. Yeah. I wonder, in the planning phase, because we have all this carbon emission that you're talking about, how then do we also prepare for carbon sequestration, so to speak, carbon sinking, in light of, the ESG that we're talking about moving forward?
It becomes important that we think about the environment. We have talked about climate change for a long time, but what we have failed to do is that climate change is a factor of land use. And the more we use our land in a manner that is not sustainable, the more we contribute towards climate change and its effects. So thinking about, for example, our cities, how much land have we set aside for the green areas. You know, in Nairobi, we have been lucky enough to have such facilities as the Nairobi National Park, which is an open space, still with wild animals, which is a tourist attraction site. We have City Park, we have the Karura Forest.
Does it count?
Uhuru Park counts.
It's one of the lands as well.
Yes, yes. But at the local levels, you know, at the neighborhood levels, we do not even have children's playgrounds. We do not have green areas where, for example, we can have green streets, boulevards that would help in, you know, regulating carbon sinks, you know, the amount of carbon dioxide not just carbon dioxide really, but the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So it becomes important, very, very critical, that while we think about planning at the city scale, as Madam Florence mentioned, we have to think about planning at the local, neighborhood, street levels, where we have to think about in relation with the houses that we build, how many trees, additional trees are we planting? You know, she talked about the building code, our old building code being a 1968 building code, but it's even more appalling, really, that we do not have a housing act. The housing act that we use today is a 1953 act, right? Yet there's a lot of debate about housing, which should then help in focusing our minds that housing is not about the housing unit, the shelter alone. All right, it's also about the trees around our environment.
Thank you.
It's also about the not just the paved surfaces, but also the soft surfaces that will then help in, for purposes of planting eatable landscapes or other types of landscapes within the urban areas that would help with regulating development.
Thank you. Yeah. I can see we've got just a few minutes to go, but I want to just come to you, Honorable Kihagi, and ask you, of course, the county executive management has a responsibility to ensure planning authorities have access to financial resources, human capital. We're talking about facilities and equipment, and you facilitate interdepartmental and interagency coordination. But at the end of the day, money is money. Yeah, and if you're strapped with money, then how then do you steamroll all these facilities? And I wonder where you are at as a, I don't want to say specifically as Nakuru County, because I know this is affecting every other county. The 32 billion shillings has been disbursed so far. But how pivotal is it that you have funding to facilitate all these processes and, you know, coordination?
Okay, thank you, Digal. It's true that money is crucial, and these initiatives, urban development, will require money. And I also speak as the champion for land and physical planning among all the CECs, national CECs responsible for lands. And we are saying that we want to have increasingly more budgets, allocation for land use planning and urban development within the counties. But we're also saying that we need to have more innovative ways, because money is never going to be enough. So we have to be more innovative towards especially channeling or getting more funds from the private sector and other donor agencies. You realize that the private sector has a lot of money, but the mechanism of getting this money to come into the public arena is not there. The public-private partnership arrangements that we have still are not facilitating private enterprise. And that's why you would find a lot of houses that have been built by private people, but the government is not able to build the requisite infrastructure to assist this. No wonder I go and build a block of flats somewhere and I have to sink a borehole because the relevant agency that's supposed to provide me with water does not provide water. I have to use septic tanks and soak pits because the relevant agencies are supposed to do sewerage. So the private sector is ahead of the public sector. So private-public partnership is one of the ways that we are thinking we have to actually leverage on towards ensuring that we build sustainable urban areas. We are also saying that especially on the issue of making infrastructure provision cheap, what we used to call the self-contained cities. You'd wonder why someone would have to drive from maybe Limuru to go and work in Kitengera. Is it like in Kitengela there are no facilities? Is it like in Kitengela you cannot go out quickly with your family? If you've got a job in Kitengela and you live in Limuru, go there and quickly get accommodation or get a living environment whereby you can exist. We would imagine of improving walkability so that I can just walk from or cycle from my home to my workplace. How many of us can cycle to our workplaces? Yeah, are we talking of cities that are actually safe to walk, cities that are actually safe to cycle? Yeah, because that way we also maybe reduce our carbon footprint. And we've realized that there are a lot of organizations and institutions that are ready to work with us in this journey. Yeah, in Nakuru we've had people like GDC, we've had people like KenGen, we have like even some of the flower farmers there who are actually coming and adopting streets, and they are saying if you can work on this, we are able to fund you. And we are saying back on the issue of the green cities.
Yes.
Can we go green even in our street lighting? Can we get a mini grid around our markets, because we have markets with quite some substantial roofs or roof space whereby we can do solarization to light up the market, to light up the street. And we have people who are willing to partner with us towards ensuring that we have that. And with that now you have almost a 24-hour economy along our streets, and we'll enhance business activities along there. And we'll have a better, or what we call greener cities. The electric bike is there, both the motorcycle and the normal bicycle. Can we ensure that we have spaces that are properly left for the people, so that people can actually cycle to their place of work in security and in dignity? So we are thinking with these innovative ways, resources should not be the problem. We have an adage that we says resources are not, they become.
Resources are not, they become.
They become.
Thank you. I just want to give 30 seconds to each of you, because I can see also time is not really on our side as it is right now. I can see the sun also, is you're beginning to get a vitamin D there, Honorable John. I want to save you from that as well. If you can just get your closing remarks on that particular bit. You talked about the UN Assembly, the second one we had also the Kenya Municipal Program that was mooted in the first Assembly. I don't know if you have time to discuss that, but as you said, we can have another forum to discuss this. But let's just get your headline thoughts in light of also the forum that is happening on the 14th and the 16th. Just briefly.
All right. Thank you so much,
30 seconds, yeah,
for having us. I think what's important is that we're coming together, and I think I'll borrow from him that we're collaborating. We need to come together. We cannot work in different silos and doing all these things in our own silos. We need to come together, whether it's to finance, whether it's to think through the things that we're doing, but also most importantly to forge the way forward. This is the first Kenya Urban Forum.
Indeed.
I think that's very important that the county governments, the professionals, and the general public will come together to focus on an issue that is quite important.
Thank you. Fawcett Kumalo, let's just also have your closing remarks. We didn't talk about the Land Association and the Residents Associations and how they're plugging on the planning phase as well. How are they enrolled? Just briefly,
Sure.
30 seconds, your closing remarks.
Thank you. First, I think I would say that we are glad that the State Department for Housing and Urban Development has organized for this Urban Forum, Kenya Urban Forum. And this Urban Forum is going to bring also professionals from the Kenya Land Alliance and other, we have the land boards from KEPSA also going to participate in a manner that will also help to diversify the debate from what we have at the national level and bring it at the local level.
Thank you.
That's where also neighborhood associations also come in to take the discussion to the neighborhood levels. You know what's happening in Kiteleshwa and other such places, Kilimani and other such places?
Thank you.
That will be critical going forward.
Right. John Kihagi, your closing remarks as well.
Yes, thank you. First is to thank you, but also welcome all Kenyans to the Kenya Urban Forum to participate on behalf of Governor Susan Kihika and also the Council of Governors Land and Planning Urban Development Committee led by His Excellency Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, to welcome more Kenyans to participate in the Kenya Urban Forum in Naivasha, 14th to 16th of this month. and encourage them also to visit Naivasha during the safari rally that's scheduled to start on 22nd, still within this month. And we are excited to be hosting all of you.
Thank you.
I also wish to see you there. And come to Naivasha, let's enjoy. Nakuru County, we say, is a county of unlimited opportunities. And we expect that we are going to grow together in the Kenya Urban Forum and beyond.
Honorable John Kihagi, thank you for coming. County Executive Committee member, Land Physical Planning, Housing and Urban Development. We want to thank you so much for your contribution. Florence Nyole, thank you for coming. President, Architectural Association of Kenya. We really do appreciate Fawcett Komolo as well. Thank you for coming. President, Kenya Institute of Planning. A lot that we have to discuss, but our time is not really on our side. It's taking away from us. And just to remind you, the conference is dubbed Strategic Pathways to Inclusive and Sustainable Urbanization in Kenya. That is happening June the 16th, the 14th to 16th. And almost 5,000 delegates are expected here. Yeah, that's a lot. Of people that will be there for that particular conference, a maiden one in Nakuru County. And I want to thank you for the county government, complementing with the national housing, the state of national housing as well, in organizing this. Gentlemen and lady, thank you. I really do appreciate. Thank you for your valued company. Don't go away. News Center is up next.